Hello and welcome to or welcome back to my channel. My name is Marin and here you will find a little beauty, a little books, and a little teaching content. So if that sounds like something you might enjoy, I would love for you to subscribe and stick around and join me in my little corner of YouTube. Today's video is going to be my reflection on the 2022-23 school year. So let's go ahead and get into it. So before I go ahead and actually start the bulk of this video, I do want to just mention that in order to do this video, I'm using this little sheet right here. This is the teacher end of year reflection form from the Magnolia Loft. It was a freebie on TPT. I'll link it down below, but this just helped me kind of organize my thoughts into like categories, and then we're going to go off of that. So there are 4 categories on this page, and we're just gonna roll on through it. So here we go. So the first one says, what were 3 of your successes from this school year? So this is like overall successes. So the first one I put is that I felt like my students really enjoyed our morning circle / share time. So on my morning slides each day, I would include like a question of the day, and then the students would get a turn to go around and like share their answer. If they didn't want to, they could pass. But our school did implement sharing circles. That's not what we called them, but that's what everyone else I think calls them. So it's part of like the restorative classroom process, and we were all required to do that. So there were like set rules for our school to follow, and they made us a poster and all of that. But aside from all that, my students did really seem to enjoy that. So I did use a lot of pre-generated questions. I used some things from Tara West. She has like morning mingle slides. I'll link them down below. The calendar and morning meeting slides that I was using included some questions as well. I particularly liked the ones that were like making them make a choice. So would you rather type questions. That's kind of what I used to do the circles. I didn't really come up with anything off the top of my head. I was going for ease. So I used things that were like pre-generated, but I will try to link everything down below that I used for like my morning meeting slides and that kind of stuff in case you'd like to check them out. But that is definitely a success, was that share time. The kids really seemed to enjoy that, and I felt like it made us a little bit more of a classroom community. The second thing is that my students made a ton of growth on their math. So I feel like obviously how I was teaching math was a success because their scores proved that they were learning a lot. And of course, that's a direct reflection of how I was doing as a teacher. So definitely their math scores were a success. And then I also felt like as a school, we did a better job of implementing some of our PBIS expectations. So I was the co-chair of the PBIS committee, and our goal was to come up with like lessons to teach the students the expectations at the beginning of the year. We called it like a boot camp. The reboot after long breaks, where we would revisit the rules, the monthly incentives, the seasonal celebrations, and we also incorporated a like school store where they could use their bear bucks that they earned, because we were the bears. They could use their bear bucks to purchase items from the cart. So I felt like all of that was very well implemented. I feel like we did a good job with that. PBIS is something that I have a lot of mixed feelings on, but at least the process of the PBIS systems were implemented and followed with fidelity. Whether they worked or not, that's not what I'm going to discuss in this video. And then as a side note, another personal success is that I was voted Teacher of the Year for my building. So here was a picture of the flowers that I was given. You may have seen it on Instagram. I did not talk about it in my vlogs. I'm not like a toot your own horn kind of person, but obviously that was a success as well. All right, the flip side of that is the next section. It wants to know what were 3 of your challenges from this school year. So the biggest one is student behavior. I feel like if you watch any teacher's video from this school year, at some point they're going to mention behaviors. So If you watch my vlogs, you know that I had a student with very extreme behaviors. And by that, I mean like violent behaviors. So that obviously was a huge challenge. The impact of those behaviors on the rest of my students, on myself as a teacher, on the staff, on the people who had to come in and help like corral this child and kind of get them back under control, remove them from the classroom, all of that. The parent of this child who was super supportive. So I just want to make sure you're aware. It wasn't like we were dealing with this on our own. Their grown-up was exceptionally supportive, but obviously that impacts everything else in your classroom. And towards the end of the school year, I had other students that were starting to emulate some of that child's behaviors. So obviously that was a struggle. This child did not enter my classroom until the end of October. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but it did flip my classroom on its head. The way that my classroom started is not how my classroom ended, because we just had to get used to that kind of explosiveness. And obviously that's detrimental to pretty much every aspect of school. So that was by far the biggest challenge that I had this year, was that child's behavior, and then some of the other students' behaviors that were starting to ramp up as a result of seeing that kind of like on a daily basis. So that was the biggest one. But right on the heels of that, I would say the other big challenge for me personally this year was just the overall teacher morale of the entire building. Our building did not have good morale at all. And a lot of it stems, again, from behaviors and a lack of support. And I don't mean a lack of support at a building level. I mean a lack of support from the higher ups that was impacting how the building level administration was able to assist and help with said behaviors. There's just a lot going on in the education system right now. I'm sure that if you are a teacher or know teachers or watch other teachers' videos, this is not something that you are unfamiliar with. But teacher morale was a huge problem this year in my building, to the point where hardly anyone is staying in that building for next school year. A lot of people took the opportunity to find different positions, to move within the district. It just wasn't pretty, y'all. It wasn't pretty. And I'm really hoping that next year will be better in the new setting that I'm going to be in the new position I'm going to be in. So cross your fingers for me, because that was rough. And then the third challenge for me personally is that I actually had to miss several days due to my health. So I got laryngitis and was out for like 3 days, I believe. Yeah, 3 days. And it took actually 5. It took the 3 days that I missed plus the 2 days of the weekend for me to actually get my voice back. That one was rough. I also was out just a couple days here and there because I just wasn't feeling well. The thing is, I shouldn't feel guilty for needing to take off for that. And this year I felt like I got to the point where I didn't feel guilty. But in the past, I would not take off if I didn't feel well. I felt bad about it. This year, I really decided to kind of prioritize myself over that, which is why I didn't have the guilt. It was hard to be out knowing that a sub was going to have to deal with that behavior I mentioned earlier. But thankfully, the school was like super supportive and did some things to help the subs out with that. But that's definitely just on your mind when you know you're going to be out and you have students with behaviors. You are thinking about that. But overall, even though I had to miss school, I do feel like personally I wasn't upset about it. I wasn't feeling bad about it. I did what I needed to do, but there were definitely times in the past where I would have never called in for a couple of the days that I took off. But you know, this was my 11th year as a classroom teacher, and I'd been in the district as some sort of employee since 2006. So at this point in my career, I'm kind of over the guilt of having to take off for myself. But I would say a challenge is just health in general, because when you're not feeling well, it's really hard to put your best effort forward and do the best for your students. And that's kind of what the challenge was. It was more me not feeling great and having to like push through that. By far, I was like the unhealthiest that I'd been in several years. Last year, I just felt like for a couple months there, I constantly had like some kind of cold or something. So that was the other challenge, I would say, is just the health, my overall health. All right, the next topic asks, what were 3 things you learned as a teacher this school year? So the first thing is that it is so important to give short, concise directions, particularly if you teach littles. They are really not able to handle multi-step directions, y'all. They just can't. If you rattle off a whole list of things that you want them to do, they are not going to hear all of them. They're going to maybe hear the first one and the last one, and they are not going to be able to do what you need them to do. So getting my directions down to short, concise directions was very, very helpful, especially with students who have behaviors, left no wiggle room. And I feel like that just really helped. And that's the same with directions of any kind. Giving short, concise directions was very, very helpful. Definitely something I'm going to continue doing. The second thing is that you need to vary activities to keep the students interested. This was especially important when it came to their independent work time during rotation/centers. I needed to keep a variety of activities available to them because they just got tired of doing the same thing. Just like we as adults get tired of doing the same thing day after day after day. They're 5, they very much get bored. So making sure that I have a variety of activities was something that I learned and needed to remember, and also something that I'm going to carry into the library. Every week in the library can't be the same, or they're going to start not wanting to come to the library. I only see them once a week. So making sure that I can keep their interest, keep them engaged, very, very important. And then the third thing I learned, which was not necessarily something that I learned, but more something that I just came to embrace, I guess, would be that time frames are very fluid. When you teach littles, your activity is sometimes going to take way longer than you thought it was going to, or it's going to take way less time than you thought it was going to. That was especially the case when it came to things that required coloring. Sometimes my students would take forever to color, and then sometimes they would be done in like 5 minutes. So it was just very interesting. You kind of had to roll with the flow. And the other thing I wrote on here is sometimes you have to just embrace the chaos and just go with it. And I don't mean chaos in terms of like behaviors. That's not what I mean. Sometimes there were activities where the kids would start collaborating with each other and getting help. And that's the kind of chaos I'm talking about. Not the straight disruptive chaos, but just the rise in volume as they're working together. Learning how to just deal with that was something that I feel like I got a lot better at this year. It doesn't always have to be quiet in your classroom. It's not a bad reflection if they're loud. Just roll with it, embrace it. And that's what I wound up doing this year. And I feel like I was much more even-keeled as a result of that. All right, the last category says, what were 3 things you learned about yourself this school year? And this first one is not something that I learned, more something that I already knew. But again, just I realize that I truly do need to make sure I do this. And that is that I need quiet time during the school day. So by that, I mean, I need to be left alone on my planned time sometimes. And in order to ensure that, I would shut the door and lock it. I had 2 students that would love to come back and like get out of going to specials and stay with me instead, and to try to keep them out of my classroom and out of my space, I started locking my door. But it also means that your coworkers and things can't get at you as readily as they might be wanting to. And sometimes I just needed the break. Sometimes I just needed quiet. It's why I oftentimes ate lunch in my classroom by myself. I need that decompression time during the day. I realized that just leaving at the end of the day and having that time at home is sometimes not enough. I needed that during the day. So that was one thing that I learned about myself that I kind of knew, but definitely kind of embraced again. The second one is that I am not a morning person. Y'all, I am not a morning person. I know this about myself. I've known this about myself forever. However, I like to pretend that I'm going to get up early and I'm going to get all this stuff accomplished. No, No, I'm not gonna do that. I am a person who is in bed until like the latest possible time before I have to get up to go to work. I am not someone who's going to be able to film this magical morning routine, because my morning routine literally consists of begrudgingly rolling out of bed, getting in the shower, putting on makeup, doing something with my hair, packing my lunch, walking out the door. Like, there is no sitting around having coffee, reading, watching. No. That's just, it just doesn't work for me. I have to have like the last possible amount of sleep that I can get in order to function. And as the year goes on, that gets worse and worse. So I know that about myself. I'm gonna stop trying to pretend that I'm some amazing morning person, because I'm not. I'm just not. So we're gonna go with it, embrace it. I'm gonna stop pretending that I'm gonna get XYZ done in the morning. It's probably not gonna happen, and I'm okay with that. All right, and then the third thing that I learned about myself is that it was just time to move on from the classroom. I had been feeling that way probably from January on, and even at that point, I hadn't heard that there were like gonna be library openings. Like, I knew that there was gonna be one because my mom worked with a librarian who was planning on retiring at the end of this year, so I knew there was gonna be one. So I was thinking I would attempt to apply for that one, but it turns out there are a lot of library openings in my district, so this was like the perfect year to make that switch. But I had actually figured out way back in January that I was gonna need to try to do something different. I just wasn't sure what it was gonna be if it wasn't gonna be the library, so thankfully I didn't have to go through that whole thing, because I did get a library position, but I learned that I just needed the change. Being a classroom teacher is so hard and it's so exhausting that I just realized after 11 years, I was done and I could not do that particular part of the teaching profession anymore. So I'm very lucky that the opportunity to move into the library opened up for me, because I don't think I would have been able to continue in my same position next year. It was that hard, y'all. I know I didn't really talk about it a ton in my vlogs. I talked about it sometimes, like, but I never really got into like how I was truly feeling about it. But yeah, I'd learned that way earlier into the school year than it came across in those vlogs. I just needed something new, a new job, a new challenge, something. So I'm very glad that that opportunity was available to me, and I'm super excited about next year. I still love working with kids. I still love working in schools, being an educator. I just needed a change of position and a change in what that meant for me. So hope that makes sense. But yeah, that's my little reflection. Again, I'll link this form down below. This I think would be helpful even if you aren't filming a video, but I like how this was a good way for me to keep my thoughts like in order. Hopefully this wasn't too long and rambly. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, please leave me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to my channel if you would like to see more from me, and I will see you in my next video. Bye everyone.